Welcome back to the Kenya International Sports Film Festival 2020, the virtual edition. The movie you just watched about celebrating Kenyan runners was actually a movie that was put together, produced, compiled, and arranged by one of our actually former brand ambassadors, a gentleman by the name of Douglas Wakihuri. Yes, at the beginning of Kenya International Sports Film Festival in 2019, we had two brand ambassadors. One of them was Madam Rose Tatamuya, and the other one was a gentleman by Mr. Douglas Wakihuri, and that movie was by Douglas. It's just sad to see our unsung heroes almost forgotten, especially after they've brought so much glory to our beloved nation. We have a special speaker coming up, and his topic is a historical perspective on the progress of sports in Kenya. This gentleman is, to put it mildly, illustrious. He has had the honor and privilege of having served 4 of Kenya's presidents, from our founding father, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, to our second president, Daniel Arap Moi, to our third president, Emilio Mwai Kibaki, to our fourth president, our current president, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. This is no small feat. Having served all these presidents and also serving in the field of sports. The gentleman is Mr. SHARAD Rao, and he is one of 12 international judges who sat on the dispute resolution bench of the Court of Arbitration for Sports at the 2012 London Olympics Games. He acted in a similar role at the Athens and Beijing Olympic Games. He has served as Deputy Public Prosecutor, Chairman of the Business Premises Rent Tribunal, and Chairman of the Judges and Magistrates Vetting Board. It gives me great honor and privilege to also say that this gentleman was the chairman of the Kenya Lawn Tennis Association in 1969, when he actually awarded a gentleman by the name of Dunlop Vaz the award as, I believe, the best tennis player of that year. That gentleman, Dunlop Vaz, is actually the father of our own chairman, Mr. Asif Karim. So, as you can see, sports is very, very important to us as Kenyans, and of course to the family of the Karims, and to the Kenya International Sports Film Festival 2018, 2019, and now 2020, the virtual edition. So we're joined by Mr. SHARAD Rao, and he's going to give us his historical perspective on the progress of sports in Kenya. Earlier on, I told you that we have Mr. SHARAD Rao, and he's going to be giving a special speaker session on the historical perspective on the progress of sports in Kenya. Mr. Rao is what you would call a walking encyclopedia. At the inception of Kenya International Sports Film Festival, he was at the launch in 2018, and actually he was a panelist in 2018, and his panel was dealing with the use of doping and drugs in sports. And in 2019, he was a panelist again in the panel to do with arbitration. And now here in 2020, during the virtual edition, he is here again with us, and he is going to give us a historical perspective on the progress of sports in Kenya. Welcome, Mr. Rao.
Thank you. First and foremost, I wish to thank Asif Karim, the Safinas Foundation, John Moody, and Miriam and their team for excellent organization despite the pandemic of this year's International Sports Festival. Kenya is famed for its athletic prowess. My personal fame is more as an administrator rather than as an athlete. The only athletic qualifications that I can claim is having an athlete's foot, Achilles tendon, which I ruptured while playing tennis, a tennis elbow while playing golf, a frozen shoulder after a fall from a bicycle, and a broken nose while playing cricket. Kenya is active in several sports, among them cricket, hockey, football, and boxing, and is also making a name for itself in rugby, especially in Rugby 7. Kenya is also a regional power in soccer, but its dominance has been eroded by wrangles within the Kenya Football Federation. Hockey was the first sport that we played internationally. The Kenya Hockey Union was formed in June 1949, but before that we had played against a visiting team from South Africa in 1937 and against a visiting team from India in 1947. Kenya's hockey team competed at the Olympics as early as 1956. They competed also in World Cup, Africa Cup of Nations, and the All Africa Games, where it was placed first in the Africa Games in 1987. In motorsport, Kenya was home to the world's famous Safari Rally, acknowledged as one of the toughest rallies in the world and a part of the World Championships for many years until its exclusion after the 2002 event owing to financial difficulties. Some of the best rally drivers in the world have driven in this rally. It began in 1953 and was called the Coronation Rally to mark the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. Joginder Singh, the Flying Sikh as he was called, was on the lips of every Kenyan, young and old. He won the Safari Rally 3 times, his first win in 1965 and in 1974 and 1976. Naftali Temu was the first Kenyan to win a gold in the Olympics. He won the 10,000 meters at the Olympic Games in Mexico. Kenyan athletes, particularly Kalenjin, have since dominated the middle and long distance athletic events, although competition from Morocco and Ethiopia has reduced this supremacy. Kenya has produced Olympic and Commonwealth Games championships in various sports, especially in 800 meters, 1500 meters, 3000 meters steeplechase, 5000 meters, 10,000 meters, and more recently in the marathon. Athletics is not a sport that Asians excel at. Although a Goan, Serafina Entau, was the first to win a medal for Kenya in athletics. He won a gold medal in the 1962 Commonwealth Games in the 100 and 200-yard events. 2 years earlier, he had come fourth in the sprint event at the Olympic Games in Rome. No Asian has since performed on the track. As in all other fields, the sporting clubs in Kenya were divided racially. The first Asian club to be formed was in 1899 when the Goans formed the Portuguese Sports Club, which in 1909 came to be known as the Goan Institute and later as the Goan Gymkhana. Cricket was first played in Kenya as early as 1899 in Mombasa. The first cricket match between the Hilwalas, as they were called, and the Europeans and the Asians came in 1932. It was E.P. Navroji, a Parsi, who was captain of the Asian cricket team, who wrote to the European Congolese Cricket Club and suggested a match. The Congolese accepted and won. The match became an annual fixture since then. The first international cricket match played in Kenya was played in 1951 between Kenya and Tanganyika, and the first outside team to visit Kenya was from Natal in 1952. Asians and Europeans have actively played it since, and recently the majority of the team members are local Kenyans. Several teams, especially from India and Pakistan, visited Kenya, and in 1996 Kenya competed in the Cricket World Cup in India, captained by none other than our Asif Karim. They upset some of the world's best teams and reached the semi-finals in the 2003 tournament. They also won the inaugural World Cricket League Division 1 hosted in Nairobi and participated in the World T20. All national sports associations then were racially constituted. Thus, in August 1912, the Asians formed the Asian Sports Association. In 1920, the government allocated land to Asian sectarian groups to establish sectarian clubs, most of which were established in the same year. The Sikhs established the Khalsa Club, which in 1926 became the Sikh Union Club. In 1930, the government allocated the club a plot of Fort Hall Road with a lease of 99 years. The present club stands on that ground. Suleiman Virji Indian Gymkhana, the most prominent Asian club and the leading cricket club, the cricket club in Kenya, was established in 1928 on land allocated by the government. In 1928, on land allocated by the government, but the funds for the club were donated by the family of Suleiman Virji. Sir Yusuf Ali Muslim Club was also established, that was established in 1931. Post-independence, all sectarian clubs opened up and on compliance with government policy, changed their names to non-sectarian names. This included the Suleiman Virji Indian Gymkhana, which although the only non-sectarian club, changed its name to Nairobi Gymkhana. Its membership is still predominantly Asian, and it is the leading cricket club in Kenya. The foundation stone of Suleiman Virji Gymkhana was laid on the 4th of April 1928 by the then governor, Sir Edward Wright. I served as secretary and later as president of the club, and I am now one of the patrons. In 1970, I was in Bombay and invited an Indian cricket team to come to Kenya. They came under the banner of the Cricket Club of India. When we were deciding the composition of the team, a young man came and asked to meet Raj Singh Dungarpur, who was organizing the team from India. He told me that the young man wants us to take him to Kenya. At first I said no, but Raj Singh told me, I promise you that this young man will one day be the greatest all-rounder that India will have produced. In that case, I said, I agree. It was Kapil Dev. On my return from Holland, I was again elected president of Nairobi Gymkhana, and during that time, Kenya had the ICC Mini World Cup, also played at Nairobi Gymkhana. We invited President Moi to inaugurate it. He came, but he was in a hurry to leave. I told him, Your Excellency, if you wish to leave early, we can have the inauguration now. But at 10:30, this event is scheduled to be televised on world television and will be watched by millions. He said, in that case, I will stay. The Kenya Lawn Tennis Association was, until nearing independence, entirely European. We managed to penetrate it with Hassan Ratansi as its first non-European president. I became secretary, taking over from the European secretary who was proceeding on leave, much against the wishes of the predominantly European membership. Soon after taking over as acting secretary, I invited top international tennis players such as Rod Laver, Ken Rosewall, Earl Buchholz, and Alex Almeida, who came to Kenya 3 years in a row on their way to South Africa. Arthur Ashe was another international player of note to play in Kenya, and so was Ramnathan Krishnan and Björn Borg of Sweden. In 1968, as president of the Kenya Lawn Tennis Association, I took up the fight against discrimination against non-European players practiced by almost all European-dominated tennis clubs. As late as 1968, the secretary at the time a European, informed me that one of our affiliated clubs, the Thika Sports Club, was holding its annual championship, and traditionally the president of Kenya Lawn Tennis Association presided at prize giving, and his wife gave away the prizes. He said the club was keen to maintain that tradition. I said I would be glad to do that. He said, in that case, could I nominate John Lang, who was a tennis player and manager of the Standard Bank, to deputize for me. I asked why when I was willing to go. He said non-Europeans were not allowed to enter the club. In that case, I said, I will not only not nominate anyone, but will scrap the tournament. They held an emergency meeting and lifted the ban and invited me to preside. At the Rift Valley Championship in Nakuru, we asked where the changing rooms were, and we were told we were not allowed to use them. In that case, we said we will not play. They said their championships would collapse if we didn't play. We said we could not help that. They too held an emergency meeting, and we were allowed to use the changing rooms. My first contact with the Olympics was in 1968, when Kenya was one of the 8 countries invited to play in experimental tennis in the 1968 Olympic Games in Mexico. I was appointed manager and captain of the team, which included Yashwin Shreta and Aziz Megji, and was actively involved in the National Olympics since. A well-wisher told us when we arrive in Mexico, we should wear a sombrero at all times. He said its presence on our head would result in us not being taken for a riot. He told us if you see a Mexican making a beeline for you, transfer your wallet and your wife or girlfriend to the other side. I did not take my wife along. It was in Mexico that Kenya stunned the world. Naftali Temu, as I said, won the first track event with a gold in the 10,000 meters, followed by the legendary Kipchoge Keino, who won gold in the 1,500 meters, and Amos Biwott, who ran bare feet to win the steeplechase. When the world press gathered outside our residence to meet Naftali, he asked us what was all that fuss about. I just ran fast, he told me. After he won the 10,000 meters, Naftali said he wanted to enter the marathon. We said he was not equipped for that, but at his insistence, we allowed him to do so. We allocated our team doctor to look after him, but the doctor stopped at the first bar and didn't emerge out of it. When we were seated in the stadium to watch the finish, to our surprise, when we were at the stadium, we noticed to our great surprise that Naftali was in the lead at the half stage. He kept up the lead until when the video disappeared from sight. Coming through the tunnel, the first to arrive was not Naftali. The athlete who came in collapsed as he finished and was taken away in an ambulance. The same thing happened to the second and to the third finisher. Naftali ran in fourth. He looked around and he spotted us. He jumped over several rows with a can of Coca-Cola in hand to sit with us. I asked him how come he had lost the lead. He said he had developed stomach cramp as there was no one along the course to give him any energy drink or even water to drink. The Mexicans had no tradition for sport. They were ill-informed about what was happening. The only time they appeared to be sure was when a Mexican runner appeared and they would chant in chorus, Mexico, Mexico. Most of the time, the Mexican was last in the field, and Medico would have been more appropriate. Drug testing was introduced for the first time in the 1968 Olympics. Hormones were considered to be a potent factor, particularly in the heavy field events. Athletes took what was called Dynamol, or its improved version, Maximol. Your weight, they said, would increase, your performance would improve, but its side effects were not known to the athlete. It was said that overuse of those drugs would result in the curse being wasted away. These were said to be the short-term effect. The long-term effects were, of course, not known. The testing of drugs was confined to its presence in the urine. One American athlete, a male, who was suspected to have taken drugs, appeared before a panel. Before they could question him, he said confidently that he had not taken any drugs. The jury said, "We know. We called you here only to tell you that your urine sample reveals that you are 3 months pregnant. The women athletes were required to parade before a panel to prove their womanhood. A certificate was issued entitling the bearer to call herself a girl. If, if she failed, as did the medalist Eva, an athlete from Poland, the only alternative would have been for her to compete in a men's event. Eva passed the physical characteristic test, and the doctor said that she may even be capable of normal sexual activity. She was, they said, the victim of medical escalation, a genetic mosaic, but they refused to call her a man. Eva's disgrace started a wave of not so casual excuses from women competitors dropping out of the international events. Most notable were two Russian sisters, Irina and Tamara. They said that their mother was ill and apparently would remain ill for indefinitely. The tennis team in Mexico included Yashwin Shreta. He is the best player that Kenya has produced in tennis, and he took over from Said Koka. Yashwin won the Kenya Championship in 1961 and again in 1963 and 1970. In 1971, he was voted the Kenya Sportsman of the Year. Said's brother Majid was also among the top Asian tennis players. The two Koka brothers were among the first Asian players to feature during the hegemony of the Europeans and until Said Koka won the Kenya Championship. He won it on 4 occasions. Aziz Megji was the other tennis player of note and was in our team along with Yashwin Shreta that participated in the 1968 Olympics. He was also a fine cricketer and had played for Kenya internationally. Yusuf Karim, Asif Karim's father, was considered the king of tennis at the coast. He dominated tennis in the coast for over 25 years. Asif was a Kenyan international cricketer, and so is his son Irfan. Asif was also a tennis player of note. Younger players who took over the mantle included Shafiq Koka, Dr. Salim Rana, and Kush Bharadwaj. In 1972, we were preparing to send a team to the 1972 Olympics in Munich. We went to see Mr. Muliro, who was at the time the minister in charge of sports. He wanted to reduce the team because of cost implications and put a cross against the hockey team. He said that they are not Kenyans, but they are citizens, I told him. He replied, but they are not black. I told him that whereas we boycott South Africa for their apartheid policy, how can we discriminate against our own citizens? He said he didn't want to argue and that was his final decision. The team officials and I had a quick meeting outside, and we returned to his office to tell him that if the hockey team is not allowed to travel, Kenya will not compete. How would I explain that to the president, he asked. We said it was up to him to explain that to the president. He gave in, and the whole team, including hockey, traveled to Munich. The 1976 Games in Montreal were boycotted by Africa. I tried my best to avert a boycott and almost succeeded when the tent we were in collapsed in heavy rain and all scrambled on without reaching a decision. It was a case of rain stopped play. We also boycotted the 1980 Games in Moscow, but we participated in the Games in Barcelona. They were good games. The greatest drawback in Barcelona was the heat. Barcelona was in July unbearable, even for the Barcelonians. Only mad dogs and Englishmen, as they said, would go there at that time of the year. There was no air conditioning in the village despite the heat, and some 3,600 fans were later provided in half of the village, but were removed when the other half also asked to be given the same. The difference between Barcelona and Seoul was that in Barcelona we were able to communicate with the people. Seoul was mechanical. The volunteers in Seoul were trained to speak various languages, but they were like computers, responded only to what was programmed. I had an embarrassing but nevertheless an amusing incident in Seoul. I was invited to a reception by the Indian ambassador in honor of the Indian team. I made my way through the crowd to greet the ambassador. On the way, I saw a dark Indian in a white tuxedo, a bow tie, and a turban, which was the headgear of the Indian team. I told him to get me a whiskey and soda. He said, "Yes, yes, sir," and promptly brought me one. Handing it to me, he said, "By the way, I am Anand Amritraj." Anand himself was an international tennis player and was the brother of one of India's most famous tennis player, Vijay Amritraj. Atlanta in '96 were games for the Americans. The TV, radio, and press in Atlanta, and indeed throughout America, spoke and showed only those events which had American participants. There was no mention of events in which there were no Americans. So Kenya got no mention. Even in the flagship hotel, the Marriott, which had 18 odd television screens, we were not able to follow or see most of the events. At the Olympic Games in Atlanta, I had again an opportunity to meet Kipchoge Keino. This time he was taking me to see the Olympic Village. We could see the village from where we had alighted from the bus, but it meant walking a distance to the pedestrian crossing to cross over. Keino held my hand and said, "Run." We ran across 4 lanes of traffic and found a cop ready to charge us. He took out his book and said he was going to bill us. I told him, "This is the famous Kenyan athlete, Kipchoge Keino." And he said he would bill us also for impersonation. I said, "Ask Keino." He said, "Are you really the famous Kipchoge Keino?" When Keino said yes, the cop said, "I'm honored to meet you, sir. Please give me your autograph, and that I can take to my children." And we were allowed to proceed. The next memorable games for me were those in Atlanta, were in Athens, Greece, in 2004. Here too, the heat was unbearable. I was one of the judges on the panel of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. In 2008, I was again one of the judges in the Olympic Games in Beijing and at the 2012 Olympic Games in London. I was fortunate also to attend the 2016 Games in Rio, where Kipchoge was honored during the opening ceremony and received from the IOC president, Thomas Bach, the first ever Olympian laurel. But on our return to Kenya, there was controversy about the number of people who had traveled to Rio, about the kit, and about the money spent. The then Minister for Sports and his PS, along with the chef de mission and other officials of the Olympic Association, are facing charges in court. Queen's Baton. Queen's Baton is the Commonwealth Games equivalent of the Olympic torch, which is carried round the entire Commonwealth and is flagged off by the Queen every 4 years from Buckingham Palace. At the flagging off of the baton for the 2010 Games in Delhi, the Queen invited us into the palace and personally took us around to see the palace. In one of the rooms in the palace halls, I saw the baton displayed. There was no one around, and I went in and picked it up to have a close look at it. I suddenly saw the Queen standing in front of me. The baton had lights which flashed, and the Queen asked me what were those lights flashing for. I told her that they flashed according to the heartbeat of the person holding the baton. The Queen asked me, "Why are they flashing so fast?" I replied, "Your Majesty, that is because I am standing in front of the Queen of England." I took the opportunity to tell Her Majesty that the Treetops Lodge in Nyeri was keen to invite her to visit the lodge to mark the 50th anniversary of her becoming the Queen. She said she loved Kenya and would have been pleased to go there again, but said that was not possible because of her heavy schedule. But she said she would speak to Prince Edward, who is our vice patron, She said that was an excellent idea and that she would speak to him at dinner that evening. On my return, I received a fax message from the prince saying he would come. He came with the countess, his wife, and the High Commissioner at the time, Sir Edward Clay, told me the royal protocol did not allow him to be at the treetops when the royals were there and requested me to host the prince and the countess. The prince, when he came, had injured his eye playing ancient tennis at Windsor and had suffered a black eye. I asked him if royal protocol would permit me to tell him a joke. I told him that the joke was about a black eye. He said, "Go ahead." I told him a man had sustained a black eye and had gone to see his doctor. When the doctor asked him how he got the black eye, he said he was at a Sunday service in the local church. When the sermon finished and all stood up, the skirt of a fat lady seated in front of him got stuck in her bottom. He said he pulled it out, and the lady misunderstood the gesture and hit him on the eye. The following Monday, he again went to see the doctor. When asked how he again got a black eye, he said he was again at the church service on Sunday, and the same fat lady was seated in the seat in front of him. When the sermon finished and she stood up again, the skirt got stuck on her bottom. He said he didn't remove it, but the person next to him did. And thinking he had done it, the lady turned round and hit him on the other eye. The prince burst out laughing. At the flagging off of the baton for Delhi, the Commonwealth Games, the British athletes demanded appearance money to carry the baton through the streets of London. What they were asking was too high and what the Federation could not afford to pay. So I telephoned Kipchoge at his home in Eldoret. I asked him if he could come over and receive the baton. He agreed and travelled the next day to London at his own expense in economy class. I went to meet him at the airport and took special permission to meet him at the immigration counter. The immigration officer asked him, "Do you know anyone in England?" I told the immigration officer, "Please ask him if there is anyone in England who does not know him." I told him he is the famous Kipchoge Keino and had come to meet him and I had to take him to the Buckingham Palace. We took a minicab. The driver, an Ethiopian, went along the back fence of Buckingham Palace, on to Buckingham Palace Road. Those of you who've been to London would know that. And pointed to a building which he said was Buckingham Palace. I told him it was not Buckingham Palace. I told him we wanted to go to Buckingham Palace where the Queen lives. He said he did not know where the Queen lives. "Do you know her address?" he asked. We got off the minicab and took a black cab and made it to the palace just 5 minutes before the Queen arrived. I don't need to tell you of Eliud Kipchoge's record, breaking feat in Vienna, nor do I need to tell you of the other record-breaking feats of Kenya. You are all aware of these. Let us hope that we continue to straddle the world for many more years to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, sir. And your country thanks you. That is a wonderful historical perspective on the progress of sports in Kenya. I'm just finding out now that the legendary Arthur Ashe actually was here in Kenya.
That was in 1972.
Really?
He came with Stan Smith, and they played against an exhibition match against Yashwin Shrestha, who was then the #1 Kenyan player, and Yashwin did extremely well. He got a set out of each of those players. It was a full stadium, full packed crowd in Nairobi Club, the center court, and some good memories. Mr. Rao still remembers those matches, and it was wonderful days of tennis in those years.
And imagine traveling the world and you go somewhere where the immigration official says, "Do you know anybody in England?" And the answer is, no, the question is there anybody in England who doesn't know this person?
Very well put, Mr. Rao, very well put.
Thank you, sir. And those incidents of what amounts today to Black Lives Matter, here in Kenya, we're a cosmopolitan society. Everybody is one nation, one country. And we are very grateful for that, sir. This has been a very, very eye-opening perspective.
Indeed. And as we say, Mr. Rao's history in sports in this country, among many other things, is known as the walking encyclopedia.
Yes.
And I keep telling him that he needs to write a book, especially on his experiences on sports, because there are not many people who have the information that he has, and also Mr. Firoz Navroji,
Yes.
who has also been a good support to our festival.
Exactly.
He spoke very well last year also.
And,
so I think it's time we can convince him now to document many more experiences.
And he has supported us from the very beginning.
Indeed.
Actually from the Kareems.
Yes.
Yes, up to where we are today.
Well, as I said, he has been associated with my father in the 60s. And when he was the chairman of the Kenya Lawn Tennis Association,
Yes.
I think it was 1968-69, he awarded him the Dunlop Vase Player of the Year, and which was a huge, huge honor and award in those years.
Wow, that's amazing.